Welcome to Grand Prix Toronto. I'm Ben Seck. This is Rich Hagen and Jake Van Lunen. We're coming to you with round 2 in modern action. So we actually have Stacey Cooper versus Lucas Siow. Lucas Siow actually having quite a lot of success in tournaments, but not having 2 buys this time. So Lucas actually has won a Grand Prix and has 4 Grand Prix top 8s. Actually, he actually won in 2015 for a Grand Prix.
In this very city.
Yeah. Lucas Siow, also, I think one of his biggest accomplishments, he beat me in the finals of a PDQ once.
Well,
arguably the biggest.
I don't know why he left it off on this.
Why didn't he put that on this sheet here?
All right, so the matchup here, Stacey is on blue-white control, and Lucas is on black-green mid-range. So we'll get a sense of what that means as we move along here.
Okay, so Stacey's casting a Spreading Seas. So the blue-white control deck, I mean, this was a deck that, again, kind of showed up at the Pro Tour with some very, very kind of strong kind of supporters. I mean, players like PV, Paulo Vitor, and Rafael Levy actually played a 1-0 match at the Pro Tour. So why would you bring blue-white control to a tournament like this?
So I think that blue-white control, the reason it became so popular so fast was because of how well it matched up against the various versions of Death Shadow decks. And it was so good at constraining those decks' mana and so good at punishing those decks when they, played out their threats. It's just a very good deck against those decks. Against many decks, it plays as a more controlling deck that then ends up taking the game over. It's a style of Magic that a lot of people really like to play. It's a very good deck. It has a mana denial theme that it pushes in the early game, which is very important in a lot of matchups. I think it's going to be very important in this matchup here, depending on how the games play out and who gets to be on the play.
So with modern formats and modern decks, you decks are defined by the cards that are really, really powerful. So with blue-white control, the cards that people talk about when you play it, like a Supreme Verdict, their Detention Sphere, their Jace, how important are the important cards, and how do they interact with the rest of the metagame?
So when you're talking about a deck like blue-white control, it's less about individually powerful cards than it is about the way the cards play with each other. One of the really important parts about the deck is the fact that it's able to use a card like Getting Into the Trials along with board sweeping effects. You prevent all the damage that a permanent of your opponents will deal on the following turn, and it forces them to overcommit onto the board, and then you play a Supreme Verdict, and it's backbreaking. Your opponent is relying really heavily on one non-basic land, and you cast a Spreading Seas on it, and then you Field of Ruin another one of their lands, and it ends up just making their whole game plan crumble to pieces. So this deck is really about, finding controlling elements and setting up kind of a landslide of effects that make your opponent's deck just seem really, really bad.
Okay, so on the other side of the table, we have Lucas Siow playing black-green mid-range. This is a deck that was really showcased at the Pro Tour last week by, Reed Duke, who's, black-green is his pet deck. So, what brings people to black-green mid-range?
So this is one of the most classic modern archetypes. Sometimes people splash red, sometimes people splash white, sometimes people just play black-green, like Lucas is this weekend. The deck aims to disrupt the opponent with really powerful discard spells like Inquisition of Kozilek or Thoughtseize, and then it puts a very aggressive clock on the opponent. And what I mean by that is that it's playing big creatures that are undercosted, like Tarmogoyf and or Tireless Tracker, and ending the game quickly. It gains long-term card advantage with cards like Dark Confidant, which we're seeing here, and then has a lot of very versatile removal spells to pick apart the opponent's game plan once they have a board of their own.
So this blue-white deck that Stacey has brought, she's definitely no stranger to this deck. She actually has made day 2 at a previous Grand Prix at Modern. How important, is playing a deck of your own style with Modern? I mean, you hear a lot that, there's so many decks. How do you choose a Modern deck? People say, play what you like or play what you've practiced.
Yeah, I think that when you're playing a format like Modern, it's super important to know your deck and to know how your deck matches up in particular, situations and depending on what your opponent is playing. So playing the same deck for months on end is probably going to give you a much greater chance of doing well at a tournament than picking up a different deck that you think might be well positioned from week to week, unless you're some prolific master of the game like a Ben Sec, if you will.
Oh
my God, it's getting a little hot in here. No, so Lucas is really kind of like trying to grind out this match. This match seems fairly slow. There's a lot of questions and answers, but none of them are particularly fast. One of the cards that Lucas has in play is a Tireless Tracker. He has a bunch of clues on his side. Like, how important is grinding this game out? Is it a game of card advantage, or is it a game of like important spells? So the game is going to go longer, and right now in the long game, it looks like Lucas has a big advantage with all those clues he's accrued. But Stacey will oftentimes have some cards that are able to, kind of win the game by themselves if the game does go long enough. Sphinx's Revelation really being the big one here. So it's something that we missed earlier that was a really exciting play that I'd like to point out is that Lucas had his Dark Confidant targeted by a Path Exile, and he responded to that by using an Abrupt Decay, targeting Stacey's Detention Sphere. And in doing so, his Tireless Tracker re-entered the battlefield, and when he searched up his land off of the Path Exile, he got a clue off of it. So he got to ramp himself with mana and get an extra card with that clue. So
sweet.
A really cool play there from Lucas.
Okay, so Lucas is now... He just played a Grimflayer,
which has an awful lot of words on it, by the way. I know it's mythic, but there's a lot of words on that card.
But all the words are really, really synergistic with each other. So it's got Trample, which makes it good. But it also, whenever it deals combat damage, you can look at the top 3 cards and put some amount in the graveyard and some amount back on top of the deck, and then Delirium actually makes it bigger. So if you have Delirium, which is 4 different card types, it's +2/+2, which obviously makes it a 2-mana 4/4 in many cases, which is, kind of off the chart with efficiency-wise.
Yeah, and the fact that it has Trample makes it a lot more powerful than some of the other really large undercosted threats in Modern, because a lot of the time when you play, 5/5s for 1 with Gurmag Angler or 5/6s for 2 with Tarmogoyf, your opponent can make a really large board with elemental tokens or spirit tokens, and they kind of block it forever while they do their own thing. Because Grimflayer has Trample, the opponent cannot use that as an effective game plan.
Okay, so Lucas actually does have Delirium right now, so it's going to be hitting for 4. Stacey goes to 11 after the Snapcaster chumped the 4/3 Tireless Tracker because 1 clue had been sacrificed. So now Lucas is going to proceed to try and Thoughtseize Stacey, but Stacey plays one of my and many players' favorite cards, Cryptic Command.
Are you a blue mage?
Oh,
by any chance? As you freely acknowledge a 1 blue spell. It's not like Negate, where people could be left in some modicum of doubt. Wow.
Well, if you've got to counter something, you have to counter something that, does everything.
Really counter it. Really, no.
It's a catch-all, too. The return of permanent Sooners Owner's Hand means that it gets you out of situations that no other card could, oftentimes.
Question in the chat, who's in the booth along with Ben and Rich? Well, I'm Rich, he's Ben. Say hello, Ben.
Hello.
And Jacob Van Loonen, 2007 Pro Tour champion from Pro Tour San Diego. Along with the Doctor, Chris Lackman.
Tarmogoyf. Once, the defining creature of Modern hit a little bit of hard times. I mean, what's changed about Modern that kind of has made Tarmogoyf, which is usually, used to be a 2-mana 4/5, 5/6, 6/7. It's not quite as potent as it used to be, or is that kind of, a little bit calling a bit early?
I think the fact that Fatal Push got printed made Tarmogoyf a lot less popular because it was a 1-mana spell that could almost always kill the Tarmogoyf, which costs 2 mana.
So it got pushed out of Modern?
Yeah, it got pushed out of Modern by this card here. However, I think that Tarmogoyf is still one of the best cards in Modern, and I think that what people say about Tarmogoyf says a lot more about them than it does about Tarmogoyf. Tarmogoyf is still one of the best creatures you can play. Yes, sometimes your opponent will have a removal spell that costs less mana than it, but just because something dies to a removal spell does not mean that it is not a powerful card. It's still one of the best cards in Modern, and I think it's really well positioned right now in particular.
And you know, obviously, Lucas just won the game actually attacking with Tarmogoyf, Tiles Tracker, and Grimflayer. So Stacey basically ran out of threats, had no blockers, and you know, just couldn't really keep up with the grinding nature of the black-green midrange deck.
So, welcome along to MTG Launch. This is round number 2, the second and final round of our opening show of the weekend. I can tell you that Riley Knight, we've flown him all the way from Europe to Toronto to be with you for round number 3. He'll be in the saddle with Eduardo Sajgalik. He's our other expert this weekend, along with Jacob Van Loon, who's here in the booth with me right now. And Riley and Eduardo will kick off the pro show. You'll see the best players with the best decks. I can tell you that some of the decks that are in the feature match area right now, waiting for this one to finish, and we'll bring you as much as we can. There are some pretty interesting ones. Our backup match, when this one's done, we'll go live to Table 2, where you will see a battle of Davids. David Goldfarb against David Holmberg. Now, Goldfarb is on blue-white control, like Stacey Cooper here. David Holmberg, meanwhile, is on the winning deck from the Pro Tour, Lantern Control. But we also have a matchup that currently is on the back table, and we're hoping to get moved up if we can, because there's a almost uncategorizable deck, if that's a word, going on. First of all, there's an Infect deck. Okay, we understand what that is. But there is an Esper Zur's Weirding deck that's going on the back table right now. So now it's possible that has been poisoned to death in no time at all. So we'll see if we can get that up for you. But certainly plenty going on the back tables. But we're going to carry on focusing on this, our main match of round number 2, Stacey Cooper, blue-white control, against Lucas Siow. So here are Ben and Jake to talk about some options.
Yes. So obviously, black-green won game 1. Was that expected? Do we think that's how it should have gone normally?
I think the matchup is pretty up in the air in the first game. I think Lucas was able to use his tireless trackers to a tremendous advantage, and he kind of buried Stacey just under a wave of card advantage by creating those clues and sacrificing them. And it's really hard for a deck like hers that's attempting to have, answers for all the questions Lucas is presenting, when Lucas is able to just find himself more and more and more questions off the top of his deck with those clues.
I want to ask you a super, on one level, super basic, but in also underneath it, incredibly complex notion. The idea that getting rid of combo for a minute, assuming that we have 3 speeds. We have aggro, fast, mid-range, middle, control, slow. The theory of that triangle is that aggro gets underneath mid-range and gets to beat it essentially before the value cards get to do their value thing. And then mid-range beats control, because in theory it is under control. But control loses to aggro because it just can't keep up. Is that broadly true?
Yeah, so essentially if you want to beat a deck, you kind of want to be one step slower than that deck.
Right.
If you're trying to beat a deck that's a deck full of 1-mana things that are the most powerful 1-mana things, if you make a deck that's all the most powerful 2-mana things, your deck's going to beat them.
Right.
But if you make a deck that's all the most powerful 3-mana things, you're going to get run over and lose. But the deck of all the most powerful 3-mana things will beat the deck of the most powerful 2-mana things. So by stepping back and getting a little more expensive, you can usually become more powerful than somebody else. But by stepping underneath and being quite a bit less expensive than somebody, you can be more aggressive than them and take the game away.
Right. So in theory, therefore, of the 3 speeds, we have Lucas in the middle and Stacey at the slow end. So in theory, doesn't that in the broad outline, doesn't that favor Stacey?
I think in the broad outline that does favor Stacey, yes.
So game 1, what we saw bucking that trend was simply so much value from Lucas. It wasn't just that he had little bits and pieces going on. It was that play with the tireless tracker and coming back and more clues. He had endless value almost in game 1.
Yeah, and Stacey is playing cards like Path to Exile, which in some ways they're so strong because of how little they require of you in order to stay alive and to deal with powerful threats from the opponent. But they do provide the opponent an extra card in the form of a land. And there, Lucas was able to turn that extra card into 2 cards by also getting a clue off of it. And when you're playing a removal spell and spending a full card and you're giving your opponent 2 cards while doing so, it's going to make the game really hard to win if you're trying to be the control player. So, yes, absolutely. I think everything you said, spot on.
However, someone in chat called Yellow Hat, which it sounds vaguely familiar, suggests that this is actually quite a bad matchup for Stacey. So, well, everyone's got an opinion, and we'll see how this works. So,
and I have not played much with the blue-white deck, but I can assure you that somebody named Yellow Hat, who is a Hall of Famer and I would say likely the best pilot of this blue-white deck, perhaps on the entire planet, probably knows a lot better than we do.
Stacey, Gab Nassif says you're in trouble. So let's see how Game 2 plays out. Here's Ben Sek and Jacob Van Loon.
Okay, so Lucas opens up with Inquisition of Kozilek, disrupting Stacey's hand, nabbing a Gideon of the Trials. Actually, probably one of the reasons why, the black-green deck does have a lot of game against the blue-white control deck. It's these 1-mana disruption spells like Inquisition and Thoughtseize.
Yeah, Stacey wants to have the right answer to what Lucas is presenting to her, and if Lucas is able to tear her hand apart, then it's going to be hard for her to do that.
Okay. So Lucas follows up his first Inquisition with the second one. Stacey is responding by fetching a land, which implies that she may actually either have a card that she wants to cast to avoid the Inquisition, which I think she does. She actually plays a card that a Snapcaster Mage that can't flash anything back, just so because it would get taken anyway, and it's better to have something in play than losing it into the graveyard.
Yeah, and that's it's not very good for Lucas there because Lucas just spent a card to do nothing essentially.
He just discarded an Inquisitor. Well, he got a little bit of info.
Yeah,
but that's not worth a card.
Yeah, he got some info and he reduced the power level of the Snapcaster Mage that was in Stacey's hand by a significant margin. But it's definitely not what he wants to be doing with those Inquisitions.
Okay, so 3 mana, 3 discard spells, Thoughtseize. Lucas already knowing exactly what he wants because he's seen the hand before, taking Jace, Architect of Thought. Now, Stacey, has lost 3 cards, but has a board presence.
Yeah, she is, ahead on board right now. That 2-1, likely not very long for this world.
Well, so Lucas playing a Collective Brutality, not choosing to escalate. I mean, the most likely escalation he may have done would be the discard ability, but he knew Stacey's hand didn't have an instant of sorcery, so avoided doing that. Now we're kind of in what I call almost the start of the mid-game.
Yeah, and see, here Lucas has kind of found himself in a troublesome situation where he had a whole lot of disruption without the threat to back it up. And one of the keys when you're watching a deck like black-green midrange is to look out for situations where the black-green midrange deck can not only disrupt the opponent, but also apply pressure in some way. And that's going to make the deck really, really powerful when it can do that.
So Lucas plays a Dark Confidant, but Stacey actually has a way of getting rid of it with a Celestial Purge. Also, actually, one of the interesting things, that appears on both sides of the board is that a newer addition in these decks, Field of Ruin. In fact, Lucas is actually using his Field of Ruin to target Stacey's Field of Ruin. So obviously, an important card in this matchup. How has that changed the face of these decks, and why do you need to play a colorless land that allows your opponent to get another land in your mana base?
So Field of Ruin deals with lands that become creatures
Celestial
very
Colonnade.
well, like Celestial Colonnade or Hissing Quagmire, like we see on Lucas's side of the table. Field of Ruin is also quite good when you're playing cards like Path to Exile also, because you get to the point where a lot of the time your opponent only has 1 or 2 basics in their deck, and you start actually killing lands with your Field of Ruin while searching your deck for more lands. it also doesn't punish your own mana base as much as some of the other cards do, and it's a powerful card. Another main reason why Field of Ruin has become strong in Modern is because people are playing with Search for Azcanta. It's able to, kill Azcanta the Sunken Ruin once people flip it in mirror matches.
So Lucas deploys another Dark Confidant. Does not look like Bob Mara this time.
No.
But Stacey brings on the OG Gideon Jura, which basically either forces the opponent to attack it or him, or actually gets to kill some tapped creatures. Also,
like that one there.
Yes. Also, allows can become a 6/6 creature when the dust is settled. It's a Confidant Fest.
Just want to shout out little thank you to Neuroplastique, who was just explaining, just casually to someone in chat, what the UW and BG is about. We use these things all the time, and until why would U be blue? Well, it's because B is for black, and we couldn't use two Bs. It would confuse people. So, so thanks very much for taking the time. Neuroplastic, and then a lot of you in chat do that kind of helpful stuff throughout the weekend. We do appreciate it because we don't always have the time. So, thanks.
So, we're about to see something really awesome here. I believe Lucas Siow has an Erupt Decay, and he can use that Erupt Decay to get both these Dark Confidants back, and then he has that Hissing Quagmire in play that he protected with the Field of Ruin. And, it would have been 6 damage to finish off the Gideon, but Stacey Cooper had a Path to Exile. But a nice setup there from Lucas, a really nice counterpunch there from Stacey having that Path to Exile. Good stuff here from both these players.
So, Dark Confidant reveals a Tireless Tracker.
Ow.
Lucas is getting a little low. I mean, that brings him to 4 life. Is he going to have to maybe get rid of his own Dark Confidant because
for the 438,000th time in Magic history, Dark Confidant's about to kill their controller?
Well, that's the power. That's the danger if you want great.
That's the darkness.
That's right.
Power at any cost, up to and including the end of the game.
I don't know. From my experience, when I've played against Dark Confidants, every time my opponent is at a very low life total and I allow their Dark Confidant to live with the hopes
they
they'll
beat
die,
you.
they always beat me, and I always should have killed it. So I am going to guess that's just how things play out.
Oh, I love this card so much.
Supreme Verdict. So in some ways, okay. So Lucas is going to die to that Gideon, so actually it's chump blocking with that Hissing Quagmire.
Last night's chicken was very tasty. That's my supreme verdict.
Okay.
Pulse.
And there, Stacey showcasing some of the real power of her deck, setting up with a Planeswalker that forces your opponent to commit multiple threats onto the battlefield, and then using Supreme Verdict to clean things up.
Okay.
And their final 4 points of damage dealt with a Celestial Colonnade.
1-1. Now, let's talk about being results-oriented versus process-oriented, because Yellow Hat in chat, Gab Nassif, Hall of Famer, said, of course, now that I've gone in chat and said Stacey's in trouble here, the matchup's bad for blue-white control, Stacey will obviously go on and win this match. Now, that's a certain amount of cosmic karma going on.
Yes.
But more to the point, whether or not Stacey wins this match doesn't in any way contribute to the huge sum of knowledge about the generality of the matchup. It's really important when you say, oh yeah, big favorite. It's one match of Magic. If we're going to play this matchup with these two players hundreds of times, then sure, probably the air quotes right result's going to happen.
Right.
But until then, it's just, here we are at 1-1. We're down to literally one game. So don't worry, Gab. If you're wrong, we'll just mock you forever.
Yeah. I think that was overstated last weekend, for what it's worth. Going into the Pro Tour, I think some people were worried that Modern had these matchups that were very good or very bad for particular decks, and they were like, oh, what we just get bad matchups. But then watching Pro Tour coverage, those things were broken repeatedly over and over and over again. We saw the underdog coming out on top, and it made for better viewing, and it probably made for better playing. I imagine when you win a hard matchup, that feels so good.
And a bad matchup in Magic is a 70-30, maybe a particularly bad one, maybe 80-20. Like 20% is still a large, like 1 in 5.
That means if you played it once every day except the weekends, you'd win every single week.
Yeah.
Somewhere along the line, is it Tuesday? Look, I won. Great. That's my 1 in 5.
Yeah.
Right? Monday to Friday, playing better Magic, I win 1.
And they're really rare matchups are that bad. In fact, I would say that most players, when they have like a 60-65% like matchup, they say with the favorite or the strong favorite. I mean, most decks are like, the 55-45 range.
Certainly, I think in the early 2000s, like, for example, when you were winning in Cape Town in 2001, certainly a lot of pro groups were busy trying to iterate decks to get to 53% against the field. They were like, we think we're 51, 52, maybe we can push it to 53 against the field, and that'd be great. And that was the margin that you were trying to accomplish. So, when you go around and you play a 10-game set and you win 7-3, that doesn't make it a 70-30 matchup. That's just, small sample size is what we're talking about here, boys and girls.
Yeah, and then players obviously make a huge difference here. I mean, like a good player, they can shift a matchup maybe 10-20%. So that's even more. And so there's not a lot of kind of, like certainty in Magic. Any deck can beat any other deck given the right draws, the right play. Like there's so much kind of not variance, because variance people tend to think of luck based. Variance is as in like controllable things in a match that can change what you think is certainty.
All right, so we're underway with game number 3. Lucas Siow kicking off with everyone's favorite star +1. It's Tarmogoyf.
He is an all-star style +1.
It's currently a 0-1 here, but I imagine Lucas has a number of ways to make it grow a little bit. It's already a 1-2 now. Stacey sacrificed a Flooded Strand.
And getting a irrigated farmland. One of the things that people don't quite always realize, but that particular land is both an island and a plains. Now, Lucas did not open with discard spells, but basically did so he could play that Treetop Village. Creature land's obviously really important in this matchup. We talked about that before, why Field of Ruin was really good. It used to be that the deck with creature lands had a lot of inevitability because you'd throw a lot of threats and answers at each other, and then the only thing that'd be left standing is the land. Are they still really important in the matchup?
I think so. As long as Stacey Cooper has cards like Supreme Verdict and has cards like Path Exile, it's going to be important for a deck like Lucas's to have access to something like a Treetop Village or Hissing Quagmire to deal final points of damage or to be able to finish off Planeswalkers.
Okay, so Lucas actually wants to protect his creature land advantage, and during Stacey's upkeep, uses his Field of Ruin to get rid of Stacey's Field of Ruin before Stacey has the mana to actually use it. Fixing his Stacey's mana, which is, a little bit of a drawback for Lucas, but maybe he thinks that it's not going to make that much difference. And Stacey immediately plays another Field of Ruin. And a Detention Sphere. So Detention Sphere, one of the kind of cleanest answers. Like, it basically deals with everything, and sometimes multiples of everything. Lucas responding with a Inquisition. Okay,
there's a lot going on there.
Wow.
And looks like only one available target, like the Storomand in Stacey's hand. She has a lot of powerful spells. Jace, Architect of Thought, Venser, Shaper Savant, Gideon Jura, and Diana Ross and the Supreme Verdicts.
Oh my god. I was busy with chat just for a moment, and I came back in at the word Diana Ross and thought, how did we get there? And the Supreme's Verdict, my word.
Okay, taking the only card that is available to him, Lucas takes the Remand.
This is a super dangerous spot for Lucas because he knows Stacey already has her 4th land, and her hand is just full of super powerful 4 and 5 mana spells.
Yeah, and like, you know, one of the best answers I think in the black-green midrange deck is Abrupt Decay, which doesn't hit that much. As it turns out, still hits the Detention Sphere, but all the threats in her hand avoid the Abrupt Decay.
And that Detention Sphere going to the graveyard is going to make that Tarmogoyf really, really, really big now. Unfortunately for Lucas, Stacey, played this game really well here. Instead of tapping out for Jace when her opponent didn't do anything there and going upstairs with it or something like that, she instead left mana open so that she could interact with her Venser, and that puts her in a great spot here to untap on the following turn after playing that Venser and have a Gideon Jura in play, at which point Lucas is in a world of trouble.
So you see that little die down the bottom, and that is actually giving us a little bit of information of representing what the current power of Tarmogoyf is. So Tarmogoyf is currently a 4/5 with four different card types: land, sorcery, instant, enchantment. Stacey responds to attacking with Treetop and the Tarmogoyf, searching out a land, thinking maybe Venser is going to come into play, possibly to bounce the Tarmogoyf, but maybe the land.
I think Treetop Village is probably my absolute favorite creature land. So good.
So many good memories, too.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, in fact, actually, she's kind of going for a little bit of a fog effect and gaining a little bit of tempo, bouncing the Treetop Village and chumping the Tarmogoyf. Just wants to keep that life up a little bit, just in case. Lucas not replaying the Treetop, playing Collective Brutality.
Yeah, now Stacey made the play she made, knowing that she had Supreme Verdict in hand and thinking to herself, I'm not going to win this game by, attacking and counterpunching and going back and forth with Lucas. I'm going to win this game by just having more power in the long term. So it doesn't matter if this Venser is in play or not, because I'm going to eventually Supreme Verdict away this Tarmogoyf. And Lucas was able to use that Collective Brutality to get that Supreme Verdict out of her hand.
Right, so, Lucas kind of was thinking an extra step ahead, basically, by understanding that Stacey was wanting to lean on that Supreme Verdict. But Gideon also deals with the Tarmogoyf. In fact, I don't think Stacey had a land, so she actually was trying to draw a land to be able to play that. Field of Ruin, targeting Field of Ruin for the 3rd time this match.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Lucas really understands that his creature lands being able to attack these planeswalkers is really important for him to be able to win this game. And just the presence of those Field of Ruins from Stacey has forced Lucas to jump through a lot of hoops here and has slowed him down a lot over the course of these last 2 games.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was talking to a couple of players who played at the Pro Tour. Like, the presence of the Field of Ruin really has changed the viability of these 2-color control decks or 2-color mid-range decks, because they used to lose to a lot of these creature lands before. They used to only be answers that are kind of like set you back in mana. So it was just a huge advantage and really allowed these decks to come back. Lucas putting out a Dark Confidant. So we're very well into the mid game now, Jake. So where does it stand? Also, kind of like taking into account the cards you are in hands right now and things like that. So who do you think is the advantage here?
I think Stacey has a big advantage. I think having Gideon Jura on the table is going to make things really hard for Lucas. I think the fact that she now has 2 planeswalkers, it means that if Lucas wants to get back into this game, I don't quite know what's in his hand, but he's going to need a card that cleanly kills the Gideon, which will allow him to attack and kill that Jace. And that's really his only way to get out from under this Gideon now. So if he's able to flip up, say, a Maelstrom Pulse or draw a Maelstrom Pulse, That would be a really nice answer here, but I think that's really the most important card for him to find here, and I don't even know how many Maelstrom Pulses he's playing. It looks like he might only have one afterboard.
Okay, so Lucas flips up a land, then casts Inquisition of Kozilek on a Snapcaster that can't be cast because of she had tapped out for Jace. And actually he does have that Maelstrom Pulse and is able to attack the Jace because Stacey, she used the minus ability, so shields were down. And so now this game, feels like it's like flipped to Lucas just in one turn.
Like if you went away for 10 seconds there and just took a snapshot of the board before there were like 2 Planeswalkers, it seemed like total control, and then Inquisition, kill this, bye, and now it's just lands for Stacey. So
Dark Confidant flips another land, not punishing Lucas at all life-wise. Lucas has a reasonable clock, has a Treetop Village and a Dark Confidant doing 5 a turn.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because Lucas can't really just attack into Stacey's mana here because of the Celestial Colonnade on her side of the board. She could just block a Treetop Village or a Dark Confidant. But the fact that Lucas is drawing multiple cards a turn means that really the pressure is on Stacey to start doing something about what's happening.
So we don't have an advantage bar at the Grand Prix level, but where would it be for you right now? It's really close.
I would say it's towards Lucas now after that turn where he was able to Maelstrom Pulse that Gideon. I think that really was it could be the turning point in the game, but it's not necessarily true that it is going to decide the game. I think it's very possible that Stacey could win this one. Oh, well.
Wow.
I was going to say, wasn't this the game one, look at all the value spewing out of this Tireless Tracker?
Yeah, and Tireless Tracker has gotten a lot better over the last week, too. Especially if there's going to be more Lantern. This is one of the very best cards against Lantern. It's a tremendous card advantage engine. It's a great threat. It's a card that I imagine is going to see more and more play in Modern as we go on.
But there's the right answer from the control deck. Let's reset the board, please.
Yeah, so obviously the board gets reset, and a lot of the advantage that Lucas was building up kind of went away, but he did actually get 2 clues, which will become cards pretty soon. It's still pretty close. I mean, it was actually a really cool sequence of events with the Collective Brutality kind of paving the way for the tracker, which also was Crypto Commanded, and then the Supreme Verdict basically cleaning it up. So it's a really, really a lot of haymaking draws right here.
Yeah, a lot going on here. But now Lucas, those 2 clues put him right in the thick of things in terms of what he's able to do, and
able to replace his fallen Dark Confidant brother. So now Lucas is in similar position that he was 2 turns ago.
Just confirm, Lucas is playing both arts of Dark Confidant, isn't he?
Yes, I mean
that's very naughty.
Yeah, it's just
that is a flavor fail,
right.
Lucas. I mean, come on, which one is he?
We're going to tell the judge to give Lucas a warning for poor art choice.
Yeah. I mean,
poor Lucas.
Because those are clearly not the same person.
Well, there's also 2 different swamp pictures. There's all sorts of stuff going on with Lucas's card art choices.
So
yeah, I mean, Lucas is much more concerned with playing the game as well than presenting himself well via deck.
Well, you can do both. You can do both.
We'll talk to him after the match. Don't worry, viewers, because I know you care a lot about that kind of thing.
So last turn we may have seen the advantage bar swing again back into Stacey's favor there. A Path to Exile dealing with the Dark Confidant plus a Gideon that could prevent the damage from Treetop Village. It's a really nice play there from Stacey, but Lucas seemed to have all the answers he needed thanks to the extra cards he had gotten off those clues and the Confidants previously.
Yeah, so he actually played a full Mana Mage, which is obviously another way to deal with the Celestial Colonnade on Stacey's side. Just to let everyone know that there's actually another... Yep, there it goes, another Celestial Colonnade. It's a different art, speaking of different arts. in the battlefield right now. Now, as kind of Lucas and we were talking about earlier, this game is coming down to the creature lands, but Lucas just has more value in like coming out of his deck. Another Tireless Tracker.
You know, we saw how good Tireless Tracker was in the first game. This game, we've already seen how good it can be. Just one of the better cards in these slower matchups. And actually quite a powerful card even in against the faster decks, because Lucas has, you know, the ability to play a lot of cheap spout removal, and keeping your hand chock full of cheap spout removal is quite good. Just Tireless Tracker, I think, one of the rising stars of Modern right now.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And, you know, it kind of feeds itself, because every time you draw an extra card, there's like, you know, a third chance you draw another land, which basically just lets you draw another card, and so on and so forth. So Lucas getting a land out of his deck, which will give him another clue.
And he wants to make sure that he at least has the ability to give this Tireless Tracker 5 toughness. That way he's able to attack into the Celestial Colonnade without fear of trading his Tireless Tracker away.
So, looks like Lucas has a Liliana of the Veil that he's going to deploy. Oh, no, he's going to animate a Hissing Quagmire and attack. Yep. This attack looks pretty safe. I mean, both cards basically have a good effect against the Celestial Colonnade. The Tireless Tracker becoming a 6/5, or possibly a 6/5, and the Quagmire having Death Touch.
And this is nice for Lucas too, because if Stacey chooses to block the Tireless Tracker, then Lucas can punish her by sacrificing the clue. But if she chooses to block the Hissing Quagmire, as she did, then he can punish her by making her discard her last card with the Liliana of the Veil.
And that's what she does. So Stacey really getting locked out of this game now, like low on resources and facing lethal, and she scoops it up.
That was a great game. Back and forth action all over the place.
Yep, terrific stuff. So Stacey Cooper can't get it done with blue-white control. Lucas Siow grinds the way with all that value to victory. He will go to 2-0. So we'll see whether we get a chance to go to one of our back tables while we're still live. We're about 5 minutes behind the main tournament. We always start feature matches a little bit late, so a couple of minutes left in the round in the main room. We've also got a time warp match that we'll try and show you some of as our team on the floor attempt to get us to another match. Now, it wouldn't surprise me if Table 2 is still going, and lo and behold, we're still in Game 2. It's blue-white control with David Goldfarb against David Holmberg on Lantern Control. It's 1-0 to the blue-white control deck. And as we join things, we've got a Rest in Peace there. We've got another Gideon Jura. That seems to be flavour of the early part of MTG launch today. Double Detention Sphere. And we're just seeing an Ensnaring Bridge come down for David Holmberg. Here's Ben and Jake.
Okay, so we've come to this game kind of like mid-lock. It feels like the Lantern Control deck has a bunch of cards out, but unfortunately, actually, I think the blue-white player has won.
Yeah, this matchup is something that, you know, when you look at the two deck lists, it may not be entirely obvious in the beginning, but the blue-white control deck is actually quite strong against the Lantern deck.
All right, so we promised you tons of Lantern Control, and that's it. You watched it lose, which I'm sure will make some of you very happy. So that is it for our live coverage of round 2, but we'll be back after these messages with some Time Walk action. See you in a minute. Hello everyone, welcome back to MTG Launch. Rich, Ben and Jake, we've got great action coming your way. It's Time Warp time. We're going to join it in progress in game number 2. So let's head down and show you what's coming your way in our Time Warp action. Here we are. It's Titan Shift for Yichao against Pedro Luis on Eldrazi. And as we join things, it's 1-0 to Titan Shift. So here's Ben and JVL with the call on our Time Warp match.
Okay, so Titan Shift. This was a deck that was very big before the Pro Tour. Actually, we had won the previous Modern Grand Prix. How does this deck work?
So not only did it win the previous Modern Grand Prix, but the finals was a mirror match between two Titan Shift decks. What the deck is aiming to do is it's aiming to get a land called Valakut the Molten Pinnacle on the battlefield alongside a number of mountains. And Valakut the Molten Pinnacle reads that whenever a mountain enters the battlefield under your control, if you control at least 5 other mountains, you may deal 3 damage to a creature or a player. Now, if you have 7 lands in play and you cast a card called Scapeshift, then you're able to sacrifice all 7 of those lands and search your library for Valakut the Molten Pinnacle and 6 mountains, thus dealing 18 damage to your opponent all at once. If you have 8 lands in play, you can get 2 copies of Valakut and 6 mountains and deal 36 damage to your opponent, and so on and so forth. So the deck doesn't necessarily have to use Scapeshift to deal that huge chunk of damage. It can instead use Primeval Titan and win over the course of 2 turns or all at once, or it can simply play its lands to win in some of the control matchups. So a really interesting and powerful combo strategy here.
A question from chat. Salat G says, did we have a single deck twice on coverage so far? I have a feeling that I've only seen completely different decks every single round. I think
There's 2 Jeskai in round 1.
We had a couple of blue-whites, didn't we? We've seen blue-white control twice, or certainly in the feature match area. Maybe we haven't got them both as far as camera, but you are absolutely right, Salatji, that basically Modern, it's just a ton of everything that's good about the game, and that's going to keep going. It's not just because it's the early rounds. Round 6 and 7 is going to see a ton of different archetypes every round.
Okay, on the other side of the match, we have Pedro Luis playing Bant Eldrazi. This is a different flavor of some of the Eldrazi's we've generally been seeing. We've seen a lot of colorless Eldrazi Tron style deck. So this was a deck that was popular a few months ago. Like, it had a little bit of a heyday, and then kind of has lost a little favor. So what's with this deck, and how does it interact with its opponent, and what's its game plan?
So it's an aggressive creature deck that also gains a big advantage by being able to tap Eldrazi Temple for 2 mana to cast cards like Eldrazi Sky Spawner or Thought-Knot Seer, like we see on the battlefield here. Just an aggressive creature deck that also disrupts the opponent. One of the better decks in Modern that doesn't have a very big following right now. I'd say that it is pretty obviously one of the top 20 decks in terms of power level, and that's actually saying something in a format like Modern, but I don't think it is anywhere near in the top 20 decks in terms of how many people are playing it right now.
We just saw on one Vuli Acid Moss. Is that a sideboard card? I think you've got the deck list there. Was that coming out of the board, or was that main?
I think it's out of the sideboard.
Right.
Yes, it is out of the sideboard.
Okay.
Obviously, it's actually quite a powerful card.
I'm going to say that's really sweet.
It basically kills a land and then fetches a forest out of your deck. So basically doing kind of dual work where it's a bit of disruption as well as a bit of ramping, which is obviously really good with Titan Shift.
Yeah, I mean, it's a rampant growth and a stone rain all at once. Really powerful card for 4 mana. Annex being one of my favorite cards of all time. This card reminds me of that quite a bit.
So Lucha won game 1 with Titan Shift. Actually, a fairly common occurrence with this deck specifically, because a lot more of the the combo decks are good game 1, but after sideboarding, people bring in the answers. So how do we feel this game's going now, considering that Lou's already up 1?
So it all depends on what's in Lou's hand and what's on the top of Lou's library right now. If Lou has a copy of Scapeshift, then
this is it, isn't it? That's
he
match
basically wins.
Mm-hmm.
However, if he does not, he basically loses.
There's a Sakura Tribolder off the top.
That does not sound or look like a escape shift.
All right, so this is interesting, though, because he already has a Valakut. He has the necessary number of mountains. He could, on this turn, he can kill the Reality Smasher by using Valakut triggers, perhaps? Does he have to...
Yeah, he probably can. He actually has a Sakura Tri-Builder that can fetch a mountain. And then he also has a Wooded Foothills.
Mm-hmm.
So that's 6. I think there's only one Valakut in play. So he's basically asking the judge right now, just a timing question with how Exalted works. It's my guess. So he's trying to figure out if...
And the thing is Reality Smasher, you only have to discard the card if it is a spell, not if it's an ability. So he will not have to discard cards to make those Valakut triggers resolve in the Reality Smasher.
I think he's just asking the table judge for a clarification. I think he's trying to figure out whether the Exalted trigger, it's my guess anyway, happens if like 2 creatures get announced, but then you use the ability. That's my guess. Okay, so I think he's doing exactly what we talked about before.
Yeah. So the Exalted trigger's on the stack. He's going to find a mountain with that Sakura Tri-Builder, deal 3 damage to Reality Smasher, and he's going to sacrifice the Wooded Foothills. He's going to deal another 3 damage to that Reality Smasher, and that's going to give him another draw step. So he needs to find a Primeval Titan or a Escape Shift here.
Technically, you can probably find another Sakura Tri-Builder to,
Prolong the agony.
Mm-hmm. That would work.
Okay, so I think he either had a forest or drew a forest there, but
it's on the low end of power level for cards he
Smash.
have here.
I don't know what the card is.
I don't know that art either.
Chat, help! Send help!
It's an art that I've not seen.
That's Beast
before.
Within.
Oh,
Very good.
Yeah. I saw the 3 counter come in and became somewhat obvious what it was.
Yep, thank you, chat. We got there.
So,
somewhere in round 8, someone's going to carry on telling us that it was Beast Within.
it looks like there's a couple land in. So decides to go for the 2/1 flyer.
And dangerous situation here.
Yeah.
He may just be dead right now.
Yep.
He is.
Dead.
All right, so that's 1-1, which means, conveniently enough, we should have time. We're 10, 11 minutes past time on the round, so we've got time to show you game number 3. All the action squeezed in here at the end of MTG launch, and Riley Knight and Eduardo Sanchalik will be with you live for the start of round 3 and the pro show. It's the rounds 3 through 6 where all the big names are playing and in full flow. You'll see all the best players, all the best decks in the feature match area as we rev into high gear here on day 1 of Grand Prix Toronto. Here's Bensek and JVL with the call on the deciding game of our Time Warp match in round 2.
Okay, so Pedro Luis starts off with a Noble Hierarch. Luo Yichao basically follows up with a Farseek, so we're just kind of building up our mana bases right now.
Jakin Parr? No.
Okay, so Pedro Luis actually turbos out a Thought Not Seer with his Hierarch and his Eldrazi Temple. What does he see?
Yeah, so there's an Obstinate Baloth and a Sweltering Suns there. Likely going to take the Obstinate Baloth because it's big enough to trade with that Thought Not Seer. Obviously, the Noble Hierarch could make the Thought Not Seer big enough that it could get through, but that Noble Hierarch doesn't necessarily stay there forever.
Obstinate Baloth is probably a little annoyed about the situation. He's there to protect against discard.
Yeah, that's not the kind of discard. The Exile is quite good against Obstinate Baloth.
Thought Not Seer not playing by the rules of discard or at least traditional discard.
And Titan Shift is a deck that is particularly strong against discard because of how powerful the top of the deck is. It has a 1-card combo. So a lot of the time your opponent rips your hand apart and then you just draw the Scape Shift and win anyway.
Question in chat with a legitimate answer. The question was, we seem a bit ill-prepared. Where are all the tokens? So the answer to that is that all the modern tokens live in a modern token folder, a binder, where we keep them all for the Pro Tour and the GPs. Right now, they're on a plane with someone who couldn't get here yesterday due to snow. So later today, all of the modern tokens will be here. But it turns out that the dealers around the room don't have all the modern tokens. So right now, yes, we are ill-prepared because all our tokens are stuck in Newark, New Jersey.
It's a beautiful place.
If you say so, Jacob. Where are you from?
I'm from New Jersey.
Oh.
So, like, an important situation just turned up for the match. Pedro played a Eldrazi Displacer, was able to blink his own Thought-Knot Seer to basically take another card out of Yichao's hand.
Yeah, now it's going to be really hard for Yichao to get back into this game because Pedro can just start displacing his Thought-Knot Seer again and again and have a lot of control over what cards Lua's going to have access to.
Lua basically tries to respond with a Thrawn the Last Troll, which does a reasonable job of, slowing down the beats on Pedro's side.
Yeah, and the fact that it regenerates also, it means that, it's going to take a little while for Pedro to fight his way through that if he's going to be able to.
I also would like someone else to reduce the beats. That beatboxing brought to you by the stylings of... I know. Do you have a name?
Beatbox name? Well, Reality Smasher.
Well, chat just call me
a little
Rich
bit bigger
the
than
Rap God
Thrawn.
generally, but that's when I'm doing turbo at 4 times the speed.
I
So
see.
in rhyme.
Okay, so we're back. Pedro has played a Reality Smasher, kind of building up a board, and it's really hard for Lua Yichao to actually build up something in the face of that Displacer kind of just always disrupting cards out of his hand.
Yeah, the Displacer, is also able to protect Pedro's threats in addition to disrupting Luo here. It's just a great card in conjunction with the other stuff that Pedro has going on.
Okay. Decides to get a little aggro here, attacking with all his Eldrazi. Luo kind of in a precarious spot. I mean, he's at 8 life. If he blocks the biggest creature, it has trample.
Yeah, it looks like unless he has something in his hand that he's dead no matter what here. We may be moving on to the Pro Show, which I'm very excited for this weekend because the pros just played Modern and just practiced Modern for weeks, and now they get to play Modern in Grand Prix field. They're going to be very well prepared this weekend.
So that was the match. Actually, Luis actually had lethal damage. Lua's troll did not stop all that through. So that is the last game for this round.
All right, so there we go. That is the end of MTG launch. Riley and Eduardo will be right back with round number 3, and it will be the Pro Show.